from the blackest corners of your mind, they call, pulling you deep into shadow, twisting your senses, keeping you from sleep. It's time to face your darkest fears. This is Tales to Terrify. Good evening, children of the night, and welcome. We have 3 stories for you this evening. First, a man who's finally coming out of his shell after a difficult breakup is introduced to a strange new kink. Then, a girl struggles to help her mama save the family homestead. And finally, a strange inheritance evolves into a troubling compulsion. Our first story for the evening comes from Craig F. Anderson. Craig is a writer, a learning and development manager, and sometimes a palm reader. He lives with his husband in St. Petersburg, Florida, but he will always be a Detroiter at heart. His short stories have appeared in a number of publications, which can be found at craigfanderson.com. Children of the night, join me for Craig F. Anderson's Succulent, a Tales to Terrify original.
I need this. That's what's keeping me from turning around when he answers the door. Well, that in his eyes. They're slate gray, but with a glint of blue when they catch the glow from the porch light. They crinkle at the corner when he smiles. In my pocket, my thumb slides over the surface of my phone, conjuring the memory of the profile pic. The green eyes, the lighter hair, the broader nose. Handsome, but not this handsome. He's wearing jeans with a white t-shirt that rides up a little when he swings the door open. It occurs to me I might have the wrong house, that my hesitation to Uber all the way to the east side this late at night may have been warranted. Those eyes, though, not to mention the inch of exposed skin below the shirt, push the prowler profile pic from my mind. You want to come in, he says? A small entryway opens into a narrow front door where there's a low electric hum. One wall is lined with shelves, each spilling over with houseplants. Rubber trees rise from terracotta pots, and spider plants cascade over the sides of plastic buckets. Round metal lamps hover over them like flying saucers, streaking the wood-paneled walls with artificial light. A large mattress, the only furniture in the room, sits on the floor against the back wall near a closed door with a brass knob. A white sheet covers the mattress, pulled taut across the surface and tucked under the sides. I know how this looks, he says, running a hand through his dark hair. I went through a messy breakup a while back, and he got custody of the furniture. I get it, I say, except for me it's the opposite. When Kevin left me, he left everything behind. Wanted a fresh start, he said. For 2 years, I've been sleeping alone in the bed that he bought for us. I'll tell you one thing, though, he says, putting a hand on my arm. It's a really comfortable mattress. It's this moment when I feel his fingers on my arm and he's close enough for me to feel his breath that this becomes real. Before, this was still hypothetical, a digital experiment, one desperate attempt to let go of the past and be a whole person again, a sexual person. Over the past year, I have clicked on a dozen profiles, but this is the first time I followed through, got in the Uber, knocked on the door. There was something vulnerable about that profile photo, something I could relate to. The profile photo. I'm glad you came over. He is chest to chest with me now. It's more humid in here than outside, and I can smell the musk of the flesh beneath his t-shirt. Your profile, I say. The photo, it's not you. He shakes his head, looks down. In my defense, he says, I'm not trying to deceive anybody. I just wasn't ready to put myself out there like that. Not yet. I keep meaning to change it. He looks at me, a beam of fluorescent light arcing across his cheekbone. If you want to go, he says, I'll understand. But I hope you'll stay. I lean forward and kiss him. More than kiss him. Smash my mouth into his face, my teeth scraping across his bottom lip, and my tongue pushing against his. I'm shocked by my own eagerness. I start to pull back, but his hand is in my hair, and the other is sliding into the back of my jeans. The sound that I breathe into his mouth is like something from a startled animal. I feel like something has suddenly snapped inside me, like I'm someone else now. I'm someone who Ubers across town in the middle of the night. Someone who makes out with a handsome stranger in the middle of his unfinished living room. Someone who is pushing that stranger backward until we're both tumbling down onto his mattress. When he pulls his face back, our mouths are still connected by a silvery tendril of spit. He is breathing hard and grinning. His voice is a half-whispered growl. What are you into? He says, pulling his t-shirt over his head and tossing it. It lands on the floor near the closed door, where a leafy vine pokes out from beneath. His plant collection must extend beyond the front room. What do you like to do? He says, now tugging my shirt off as well. I stammer. The truth is, I'm not sure. It's been a long time. I had a pretty messy breakup, and then there was the pandemic, and he leans in and kisses me, gentler this time. I hear a sound, a low guttural rattle. It's not me this time. It's coming from the direction of the closed door. My cat, he says. He gets a little jealous. Over his bare shoulder, the plants flowing out of their vessels with their shoots and vines intertwined look like one massive entity, a jade beast with 100 leafy fingers. He leans in again until his lips are against my ear. I have an idea, he says, his lips tickling my earlobe. You ever try rooting? His hand is down the front of my jeans, making it hard to think. I'm not really into drugs or anything, I say. He laughs. It's nothing like that, he says, rolling sideways off the mattress. You're going to love it. He crosses the room to the wall of plants. I watch his broad shoulder blades dance as he reaches up to a high shelf. The sound again. It's not exactly a growl, more of an exhalation. It reminds me of the sound my grandfather made when he was dying, like his breath was being expelled from his body. I crawled across the mattress towards the door. Green fringe pokes out from around the hinges. I reach for the knob, but suddenly he's behind me, turning me backward toward him and gently pushing me onto my back onto the cold sheet. He lies on top of me, cradling my head in one hand. Kisses me, and I feel the fingers of his other hand flittering across my torso and pressing into my navel. At first it tickles. Then there's a sudden stinging pain in my abdomen, and I arch my back and yelp into his mouth. Another sting, and I bolt upright, knocking him to the side. It's okay, he says, righting himself and straddling my lap. Just look at me. He puts his hands on my cheeks. Trust me. His voice is soft, his breath warm. I brush his hands away and look down at my stomach, my mouth falling open. 6 fuzzy green tendrils extend from my belly button and lay across my stomach like a mossy starfish burrowing into my gut. Each of the appendages undulate, curling and uncurling against my flesh. Beneath the skin, I feel a prickling sensation like little fingers or roots spreading across the underside of my belly. I reach down to grab the thing, but he grabs my wrist. You don't want to do that. He's trying to keep his voice calm. It's already rooting. Just give it a second till the sap hits. It's going to be so amazing. I gave you the sedum sextagular. It's the fastest. What the hell did you do to me? It starts as a shout, but turns to a grasp when I feel another root take hold inside of me. I shove forward with all my weight, sending the dark-haired man tumbling back off the mattress and onto the hardwood floor. I start to pull at the plant, sending a bolt of pain across my torso. He's already climbing to his feet, holding both hands out in front of him like he's trying to soothe the startled animal. You're okay, he says. Look! He unzips his jeans. To my left, the sound comes again, a hoarse groan from behind the door. I turn, holding my breath, and with one hand grip the doorknob with the other. I hear my companion yell an objection as I pull the door open. At first, all I can see in the closet are leaves. They stream down the walls and pool into a massive pile in the center. Then as the light streams in from behind me, I see the light brown hair, the broad nose, the pale green eyes. It stares out from a heap of vegetation, no longer the face from the profile pic, but a collection of individual features poking out from a sea of green, the rest of his body enveloped by vegetation. A low, hoarse groan emanates from the open mouth, the last vestige of his humanity, escaping the thing he has become. I turn back towards the shirtless man, my eyes wide and a scream forming in my chest. He couldn't handle it, he says. Must have been allergic or something, but not you. I knew you were right from the moment I saw you on my porch. We knew. He tugs his jeans down to expose his hip, where a burst of green and red petals blossom from his flesh as his pants pass his thighs. I see green tendrils snake from his hips to his groin, where his manhood, covered in soft green spike, hang from a triangle of dark moss. When you kissed me, he said, smiling, we could taste that you were right. The sensation in my abdomen changes, a warmth spreading outward from my navel. The scream in my chest stretches out into a raspy sigh. You see, he steps towards me. There it is. I try to take a step, but my legs quiver, and I fall forward. He catches me, lowering us both down onto the mattress. You feel it now, don't you? The warmth spreads across my torso, my chest tingles, my cheeks flush, my cock throbs. On my stomach, succulent leaves flutter, dancing against my skin. New tendrils sprout. He covers my mouth with his teeth scraping against my bottom lip and his tongue pressing against mine. I start to push him away, but my arms are so heavy and so warm, and his breath tastes like sweet herbs. I groan into his mouth like a startled animal. I feel like something has suddenly snapped inside of me, and I'm someone else. Something else now. And I need this.
That was Craig F. Anderson's Succulent, as read by Stephen Gagin. Steve Gagin is a voice actor and narrator from Boston, Massachusetts. Stephen has written 2 books in the military thriller genre, which are available on Kindle. He has participated in several other podcasts and can be found on his website, StephenGagin.com. Thank you, Stephen. Our second tale tonight comes to us from Victoria Nations. Victoria Nations writes gothic and weird horror that centers on wild spaces, queer characters, and monsters. Victoria's short fiction, poetry, and nonfiction essays appear in a number of publications, including the Bram Stoker Award-nominated Mother, Tales of Love and Terror, and Frightmarish, a gothic lit zine. Victoria lives in Florida, USA, with her wife and son, who indulge her love of monsters. Follow her online at victorianations.com and on Twitter and Instagram at leaves_cobwebs. Children of the Night, join me for Victoria Nations' Mama, a Tales to Terrify original.
Mama, I dug behind the coop today, but I didn't find anything. Mama sat stiff, her hands gripped on the chair arms. Her gnarled fingers were gray where they curled around the ends. She glared at the shovel, at my hands, to make sure they were dirty enough. I went at least 4 feet down. Any deeper and it would have been like digging a grave, Mama. I wouldn't have been able to climb out. Mama sat in stony silence, mean as a snake and better at staring me down. Her face didn't even change expression. She couldn't see the hole I dug. She wouldn't see it. She never left her back porch chair anymore. But her stare bored through me, through the coop, and to the back of the yard as if she could see it and appraise my work. It would fall short. One of these days, I swore I'd stab the shovel into the ground right in front of her, and I'd walk off without being dismissed. I'd poke the snake and make her strike. One of these days, the surveyors would get closer to the house and find out Mama was still here, coiled up and waiting. That hell was likely coming faster than the one where I managed the gumption to walk away from her before she was done with me. Mama's voice grated through my head, quashing any hint of defiance, and I couldn't look at her anymore. I stared at the shovel instead. I'd left Claude stuck to the blade just so she'd hush about it. But the dirt was never enough. Mama had me turn out my pockets and clean up the porch before I could go. "I'll clean up the shovel too," I said, careful to keep dirt from dropping as I carried it down the steps. Mama's warning was sharp. "No, Mama, I'm not sassing you." "Mama, that man talked to me again about the house today when I was up at the store. I didn't answer him, just like you said. I practically ran away." I balanced the grocery bags in my arms. Mama's face was inscrutable. The shovel was propped on her chair waiting for me. "He followed me for a few steps, but he didn't come after me, just shouted." Still no reaction. Damn her. I shifted the bags to the other hip. "I was scared, Mama. He started talking about the house, and he knew about the silver. He said it's all made up. He said..." Her gravel voice stopped me. Mama gave no truck to nonsense, and everything I said was nonsense to her. "No, I didn't linger around listening to him." The old woman had me cowed again. I could barely look at her when she was like this, could barely speak. Mama stared as I dropped the groceries inside the kitchen and came back out. It was obvious she expected me to get back to work. "Mr. Johnson found me outside the store and brought me the bags I dropped," I said, careful to keep my voice light. "He's really nice, Mama. He asked after you. He said you were the prettiest thing. Said he hoped you'd come see him at the store." Her growl was almost too low to hear. Poor Mr. Johnson was never going to get anything from Mama. "Yes, Mama. He was fresh." I took the shovel from her. "I didn't talk back to him, promise." "Mama, I don't think your hair is going to hold the curlers anymore." Tufts of hair lay in my hand, and I wasn't sure what to do with them. I couldn't drop them onto the porch floor or Mama would have a conniption. Her neck was rigid in front of me, but she'd spin around and catch me sure as sunrise. I tried sliding the comb through her hair again, slower this time. Mama didn't flinch. That woman wouldn't show the least sign of weakness, even if she was being snatched bald-headed. Which she was. Strands snarled in the comb teeth and pulled free of her scalp. "It's going to come out in clumps if you keep curling it in your condition," I scolded. I patted the loose hair down, willing it to reattach. If Mama believed in hairspray, I could just mold it into a mass and stick it in place. But she still wore her curls loose. The town ladies used to use that word to describe her too. Mama muttered, "I'm trying not to pull so hard." I grabbed a curler and wrapped a few intact hairs around it, pushing the handful of others into my overalls pocket. I propped the curler up with 3 pins, careful not to scrape against her skin. Mama gave no sign if she noticed. She'd gone silent again. "I'll get as many in as I can." Mama thought she could sweet-talk those men away from taking the house, and maybe she was right. Even in curlers, she was still beautiful. Curls down, she'd be as pretty as the pear trees that used to bloom in the yard. It'll stop them in their tracks for a minute. Enough time to figure out what to do next, I guess. Mama won't run. Her days of running are over. She'll want me to stand with her. I don't know what she'll have me do with the shovel then. Mama, remember when the okra came in that year? I sat on the porch step, snapping beans at Mama's feet. I'd washed my hands in the hose water before grabbing the bowl from the kitchen, but I'd need to scrub at the sink to get the dirt from around my nails. Mama stared into the distance. There wasn't anything to see out there, just overgrown field and the empty coop. You couldn't even see the fence from the porch, which was a good thing. Chattering seemed the best strategy to keep her from asking about the beans. If she did, I'd have to tell her Mr. Johnson brought him to the fence, saying he had too much in his own garden. He was checking on us, I knew. The town knew we were supposed to be gone. They knew while we were still here, too. I'd stowed the shovel against a tree before talking to Mr. Johnson, but he'd spotted it anyway. Mr. Johnson didn't say anything, though, except to ask after Mama. Every time we talked, he'd asked. He'd be friendly, talking about the weather and such. He'd ask how I was doing, even on the days I was too shy to answer back. Then he'd come over weird and ask if Mama might come to town sometime. His eyes would change when he asked, become stricken and red, like he was on some drug. Today, when he asked after her, he pretended not to stare at the shovel and said looking for lost things was a good way to lose yourself. Then he walked away, leaving me the whole bag of beans. The town knew, and I guess I knew too why Mr. Johnson never got married. There was something buried in him. You put okra in everything that year, Mama. You even sliced up the big pods and fried them with sage, and you told us they were sausage. Remember that? You made me tell Sissy they were sausage. No response from Mama behind me, but that was no surprise. She never wanted to talk about Sissy, talk about lost things. I never liked lying for you, Mama, I continued, snapping beans like I didn't mind a reaction. It made my heart hurt. I don't like lying for you now. I chanced looking around, and Mama sat stoic. Her mouth was set in a grimace. The shovel lay across her lap, the message clear. I'd taken a file to the blade, and bright metal ran along both sides. I kept snapping the beans, my heart feeling dead, deader than Missy. I hated her sometimes. I hated the things Mama made me do. Mama, there's surveyors out back. I crouched behind the coop like you told me. One's pacing the back property, the other's at the north corner post. I'd started talking before I got to the top of the porch steps, and I stood right in front of Mama so she'd have to look at me. I wiped my hands off on my pant legs while catching my breath, but they were just as dirty. I'd stopped filling the holes weeks ago, but I hadn't thought about them being useful until today. I don't think they saw the hole out by the back corner. I swiped a hand across my cheek, and it came away muddy with sweat. Mama's question was clear in her eyes. There's nothing in the holes. I would have told you if I'd found anything. Her eyes narrowed, eyes with accusation, and I gave up. They said they're coming to the house tomorrow, Mama. Mama won't answer you, officer. One officer stood in front of Mama, hand on his hip, close to his gun, but not touching it. The one behind him would have been blocking the porch steps if he was standing up straight. Instead, he was bent, hands on his knees, staring into Mama's face. I'd seen her stand up to worse. They stared at her and she just looked past them, out into the yard where the surveyors tromped around. They stood at their tripods and held up instruments, but they were watching the porch more than taking measurements. She doesn't like the government much, I offered up. The bent-over officer glanced over at where I stood in the kitchen doorway, then stood up and rubbed a hand across the back of his neck. He didn't look insulted by what I said. He probably ran into a lot of stubborn old ladies across the county. He probably had to run a few off their land each year. None of them were as fixed to her land as Mama, though. They'd have to carry her off. "Ma'am," the first officer asked, "has your Mama been like this long?" "Obstinate, you mean?" I smiled down at Mama's tight face. Her lips had been pulled back so it looked like she was baring her teeth. The look suited her. "Yes, sir. My whole life." The officer nodded, and the one behind him kept rubbing his neck. They weren't the first men to be flummoxed by Mama. Already they were exchanging looks, and their shoulders were beginning to hunch, like they always did right before giving up. The first officer took the lead. "Ma'am, we're going to confer on this. You stay here with your Mama, okay?" "Absolutely, officer." They turned their backs, and Mama handed me the shovel like usual. Sharpened up, it shined just like Mama's silver.
That was Victoria Nation's Mama, as read by Amanda Stribling. Amanda has recorded close to 150 books, give or take a chapter, and is in the industry by way of being completely obsessed with reading and audiobooks, while also having a flair and passion for performance. She has a natural Southern accent, but can also take you from savvy socialite to California girl to Southern belle faster than you can say, "Bless your heart." Thank you, Amanda. Our final tale tonight comes from Lyndsey Croal. Lyndsey Croal is a Scottish author of strange and speculative fiction, with work published or forthcoming in several magazines and anthologies, including Flash Fiction Online, Apex, Weird Tales Magazine, and Pseudopod. She's a Scottish Book Trust New Writers Awardee, British Fantasy Award finalist, former Hawthornden Fellow, and a Ladies of Horror Fiction Writers Grant recipient. Her debut novelette, Have You Decided on Your Question?, was published in 2023 with Shortwave Publishing. Find more of her work via lyndseycroal.co.uk. Lend me your ears, children of the night, for Lyndsey Croal's Faceless, a Tales to Terrify original.
The Faceless dolls have lived in the drawer of Nana's antique cabinet for as long as I can remember. Even after she stopped painting, she refused to get rid of them. Never leave a task undone, she would insist. And they're not finished yet. It had been her job for years before arthritis made it too hard to hold a paintbrush for long. Painting their expressions, stitching clothes, weaving hair. When my sister and I were younger, we were gifted the finished dolls for birthdays or Christmases. I had one that I remembered well. It looked like me, with dark brown hair and a red tartan dress that matched the one she bought me for Christmas the year before. The doll lives in a charity shop now, after my university flatmate insisted it was creepy and weird. I didn't disagree, and by that point I hoped Nana wouldn't notice them gone. She'd always been precious about her dolls. 2 weeks before Nana died, she asked me about the faceless dolls in the cabinet. She wanted me to help her finish making the ones that were left. When I told her I didn't know how, she insisted she'd teach me. Because if she couldn't finish them, someone needed to. She was insistent. But then by the next day, she seemed to have forgotten and asked instead if we'd found the red-haired doll with the smile. The one with the gray eyes and the uneven grin. I couldn't remember whether a doll like that had been gifted to one of the other grandchildren or not, so I told her we'd look for it and bring it to her if we found it. No, she said. If you see her, leave her be. Promise me, Maisie. Leave her be. It's Aaliyah, Nana, I replied. But do you want me to get Aunt Maisie? Aaliyah, no, just leave her be. She shook her head. She can be very insistent, that one. In her will, Nana left me the cabinet, and now it sits in my hallway, mismatched with the IKEA furniture that inhabits the rest of my flat, taking up space I don't have. I open the drawer to peer in. Dozens of faces stare up at me, blank, as if their expressions had been melted away. Part of me wants to pack them all up, to throw out, but it feels like it would be giving away a piece of her. And this is the last thing that Nana wanted me to have, to take care of. Besides, the words of Nana still echoed in my mind. Never leave a task undone. The parcel arrives on Christmas Eve, wrapped in silver paper with a red bow, the way Nana used to wrap them. Curious, I take it inside, place it on her cabinet and open it. Inside is a doll, with a white pinafore, long red hair, pale gray eyes, and a lopsided smile. When I pick the doll up, her eyelids flutter slightly, eyes catching the glimmer of the hallway light, making them appear green. I place her on the cabinet and look for a note. There's a small card in my Nana's hand that reads, "My dearest Aaliyah, always remember that family is the most important thing." In the evening, at family drinks, I ask if anyone else received a gift from Nana and tell them about the parcel. None have. She probably sent it out earlier in the year, to arrive for Christmas, in case she wasn't here, Aunt Maisie says. Then she lowers her voice so only I can hear the next part. She still had her moments of clarity, you know, and you were always her favorite. Maybe it was a wee final gift. I don't really want it, I say, thinking of the box back home, the way the eyes seemed to move when I held it in the light. It's creepy. Leave it be. What harm can it do? I wake up on Christmas morning with ink stains on my hands. Confused, I get up and wash them in the sink. Black and reds washing into the water. Outside, a frost has settled, and snow is falling. There's a distant sound of carol music coming from one of the neighboring flats. And in one above, children are running around screaming, probably playing with brand new toys. Downstairs, the doll is sitting on Nana's cabinet. Next to her, 2 new ones are seated. Their eyes have been colored in black and gray, their lips only half drawn with a red smile. Did I paint them? I look at the stains on my hands, and there in my mind is a vague memory of waking last night, tiptoeing down, getting out the paintbrushes, thinking of Nana, and drawing the faces. An uneasiness creeps up my spine. I've never sleepwalked before, never mind sleep-painted. The head of the gray-eyed doll that Nana sent me is slightly tilted, her legs hanging off the edge of the cabinet. Rubbing at the ink under my nails, I put the dolls back in the cabinet drawer and get ready to head to my parents' for the day. Mum has dressed up in her usual festival garb, in a bright green dress with purple lipstick. When she smiles, I feel a shiver from the cold. She ushers me inside and we sit around the table. I can't help thinking about the dolls in my flat. In the drawer. Alone. Still. With their half-painted smiles. I pick at my nails, still trying to remove the last of the ink. Ellie asks me after dinner about Nana's cabinet. "You're so lucky to get something like that," she says. I don't think she liked me very much. She pushes her red hair behind her shoulders, the contrast stark against her bright white dress. "That's not true," I say. "She loved all of us." "No, really," Ellie insists, her words slurring slightly, her champagne slopping out of her glass as she says the next words. "You know the last thing she said to me?" I shake my head. "What?" She said, and this is word for word, "Leave my family alone, you evil, evil girl." Ellie rolls her bright green eyes. Pretty conclusive, I'd say. Evil? Me? Her laugh is a cackle, then she slurps more champagne, finishing it in one go. "Don't listen to your evil cousin being all morbid." Laura leans over. She's just bitter she didn't get something expensive in the will, and she loses all tact after a drink. I force a smile as Ellie looks scandalized as she gives her older sister the middle finger. They both laugh. "Do you remember the dolls?" I asked them. "The ones we got as kids?" Laura asked. "Yeah." "I guess. They're probably all thrown away or at a charity shop," Laura says. "No," Ellie says. "Mom still has them in storage, I think." "What does Mom have?" Aunt Maisie shouts over the table. My ears were burning. "Nana's dolls," Laura says. Aunt Maisie looks at me with a strange expression. Then she shakes her head. "Oh, they're probably in a box somewhere. Always gave me the heebie-jeebies, though. Sometimes your Nana treated them like they were her own children." "They were just a hobby," my mom says with a slight tisk. She was really very talented at it. Made her a decent living after Dad died, too. "You didn't have to live with the cabinet in your room," Aunt Maisie says, sitting there at the end of my bed. She leans over and looks at me direct. Sometimes, I could hear those little creepy faces whispering to me at night, scheming away. Mom rolls her eyes. "Don't worry, Aaliyah," she says. Aunt Maisie also used to sleepwalk, and when she woke up, had all sorts of ridiculous stories. "Did she ever do anything when sleepwalking?" I ask a little too keenly. "Like what?" Aunt Maisie gives me another narrow-eyed look. I'm about to reply when one of the cousins starts to sing a carol drunkenly at the other end of the table. And distracted, everyone starts to join in. But I find myself looking between Aunt Maisie and Ellie, both with their red hair. Ellie with her half-smile and slightly sunken eyes that make her irises look gray in some lights. On Boxing Day, another new doll is waiting for me as I go downstairs, next to the red-haired doll, and the other newly painted faces. One of them has the same blue eyeshadow Aunt Maisie had been wearing the day before, and another, bright purple lips like Mom. My hands are inked again, purples and blues and grays on my fingertips, and staining my bedsheet. The purple-lipped one has a green dress, and when I go to my wardrobe, I find a piece cut out of my favorite t-shirt of the same color. By the time Hogmanay arrives, I've woken to 6 painted and stitched dolls, ink everywhere, more dresses and shirts with pieces cut out. That night, exhausted, I go to bed early. But I'm awoken by fireworks at midnight. Except I'm not in bed. I'm standing by the cabinet, putting more of the dolls together. My hands are covered in paint, and in front of me are a dozen dolls. There's something familiar about the eyes, the way they dress, sitting gathered in a circle like my family at gatherings. I shake myself out of it and get a cardboard box, put all the finished dolls in it and then tape it up tight. The next morning, I leave them outside a charity shop on the other end of town and head home with the New Year's revelers. The occasional line of Auld Lang Syne, should old acquaintance be forgot, trills in the winter air. I dump the rest of the Faceless dolls and painting supplies and sell the cabinet to an upcycling shop. A bargain for them, but I don't care about the money. I just need the cabinet out of my flat. I finally sleep soundly that night, and in the morning, there's no sign of sleepwalking nor sleep painting. The parcel arrives on Christmas Eve. A familiar cardboard box. No address. With simply a stamp and return to sender written on it. My hands shake as I open it. Inside, 13 dolls stare up at me. The 12 I sent away, plus another. A doll with dark hair and a red tartan dress. I've seen her before. So familiar. As she smiles up at me, I find I cannot look away. My eyelids flicker, my body stiffens, and finally, I smile back. I arrive at Mum's early on Christmas morning, a skip in my step. "You got another tartan dress," she asks, beaming. "Nana always loved it on you." I smile, twirling, showing off the fabric. "I made it." "It looks great." She peers into the box of presents I brought. "You didn't have to bring all these gifts." "It's my pleasure," I say. I place the gifts by the tree and sit, waiting for everyone to arrive. I pass the presents around and the family takes them all slightly perplexed. "Open them," I say. "I wanted to make something special this year." One by one, my family opens their gifts. All 12 of them. Dolls, with newly painted faces. "My one looks like me," the youngest cousin says. "Geez, Aaliyah, Nana's were creepy enough, but these are just bizarre," Ellie says, her mouth scrunched up. "Why is her grin all lopsided like that?" I stand up and smile, catching my reflection in the mirror above the fire. For a moment I forget where I am, cocking my head slightly, hardly recognizing the person in the mirror. Something isn't right. I don't remember these gifts. Don't remember making them, wrapping them, coming here. I sent the dolls away. I didn't want them anymore. What day is it? Someone steps in front of the fire, holding their doll into the light. My uncle, looking unimpressed at the likeness. I blink and look back at the gathered guests. "My family," I say, snapping out of my reverie. "Time to wake up now. It's so wonderful to be together again. It's important, especially during the holidays."
That was Lyndsey Croal's Faceless, as read by Danielle Hewitt. Danielle is recording out of New Bedford, Massachusetts, where the people can be just as scary as any horror story. When she isn't recording, she tends to the 2 small children living in her house. They just won't stop screaming at night. Danielle is a graphic designer by trade, spending most nights photoshopping horror scenes out of your worst nightmares. Thank you, Danielle. Well, children of the night, the hour is late, and we've run out of tales to tell. For now. Tales to Terrify is made possible by the tremendous generosity of our supporters on Patreon and PayPal. Incredible fans like Lestle Baxter, Amanda Carrillo, Amanda Gottfried, and Orion D. Hegre, whose generous support keeps these lights on and flickering ominously. If you're not a supporter, head over to patreon.com/tales to terrify. You'll find all kinds of perks, like ad-free episodes, bonus content, and one-of-a-kind collectibles. Every dollar goes back into this show, and we appreciate your support so much. Want another way to support the show that doesn't cost you a cent? Head over to Podchaser, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts and drop us a 5-star review. You'll not only put an unnaturally wide smile on our faces, but help new listeners discover our terrifying tales too. You can show your love of the show out in the world with some Tales to Terrify merch. TalesToTerrify.com/merch will take you to our TeePublic store, where we've got a great collection of creepy custom and curated designs. Tales to Terrify is produced by Seth Williams, Meredith Morgenstern, Andrew Gibson, Crystal Hammond, Spencer Disparty, and myself, Drew Sebastini, with original theme by Nebulous Entertainment. Tales to Terrify is distributed under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license. Join us again next week as we drown our fears in more Tales to Terrify.